Morning, everyone. How are you? I really appreciate you guys letting me come on here and share a little bit about the job search. Want to make sure, can everybody see my slides? Yes?
Yes.
I don't get to see you talking, so yeah, okay, great. So yes, I work for Q2. We're actually rebranding at some point soon. Q2 eBanking is our email address, but Q2 software is really what we do, and we will be calling ourselves Q2 here shortly. So again, thanks for having me. I enjoy every time I have a chance to meet with you guys and share insights from being a recruiter. And as Craig mentioned, I've been doing recruiting for a number of years. It's funny the things that people pull up when they start reading about your bio. Yes. Taught English in China a very long time ago, pre-Tiananmen Square, for those of you guys that remember that. So it was back in 1987. I'm old. So I absolutely love and adore helping people find really fulfilling careers. As you can imagine, at this point in our lives, our careers are a little different. Right now, I'm talking to a ton of people that have been laid off, their companies have closed, or they've been furloughed for whatever reason. Almost every single one of them, it's absolutely no fault of their own. And that's just how it is in the economy. The economy was already tight, right? So we know that there are a ton of people looking for new opportunities, and then we didn't necessarily have enough jobs for them. But you guys are in the right place. You're getting the tools that you need from the Job Seekers Network on how to build a really good resume, how to have really good conversations with your interviews, and how to apply and how to network with people. And I think one of the biggest benefits of meeting up with this group as often as you can in person is you have a chance to really figure out where people have come from, what they're looking at. You can also hear about different opportunities that might be right for you, weren't right for them, but companies that you may not have heard of. So I'm always a huge, huge advocate of using all the tools and resources that you have available to look and find opportunities for yourselves. I think the number one thing over the last at least 12 years is really your network. And it doesn't necessarily need to be who do you know, it could be who that other person knows. So if I don't know someone, but Craig knows somebody, then I can say, hey, Craig, can you make an introduction? So that first, second, third connection that you have, and I use the word connections because that's the words that we use when we're talking about LinkedIn. Those are super, super important. So when you're in your job search, I always say use every single resource that you have available, and your network is always one of the biggest ones that you have available. I'd love to see too, I would love to answer questions as we go through this too. So if somebody can help me double check on any of the chats, I think that would be great. I would love to be this as interactive as possible. So again,
yeah, we'll be monitoring chat and let you know. So go ahead and start asking your questions on the chat room.
Yes, please. So again, so many people, so many jobs. Obviously, this is an old school job career search, which is great, and those still happen when we get out of this seclusion, isolation that we're in. But really, your job search should probably be online, right? Like Craig mentioned, we have a number of roles open at Q2, and there's still a lot of companies hiring. He mentioned that I'm part of the Austin Recruiters Network. We are a group of recruiters. We have a Facebook page. We have a LinkedIn page. We meet as often as we can in person to really talk about best practices in recruiting. And you may not even realize there's such a thing, but there are. One of the things that we talk a lot about is not only do candidates ghost us, and if you've heard that term ghosting, meaning you never reply to them again, we know that recruiters oftentimes ghost candidates, and that is not a best practice. And that's something that we would like as our industry to stop. So just know that on the back end, if you've applied to something, it takes a little while for us to get back to you, and sometimes they never get back to you, and sometimes it's just a little bit overwhelming. One of the things that I really think is important when you're doing your career search and as you're getting ready to do interviews in person, online, let's preface this, They're all online right now, right? We've been doing Zoom interviews since mid-March. We have not had a single candidate on site. We haven't been on site. I've been working from home since March 4th. So Q2, we were sent home really, really early. We've also been told we will not be coming back anytime soon. I expect that I probably won't be back in the office until July at the soonest. So research those companies, and obviously you can find a lot of information on the company's website, but let's be real, that's their marketing tool, right? So they're wanting to tell their customers and potential candidates about themselves. So everything is probably going to be great, right? I would look at Glassdoor. Granted, Glassdoor, when you're looking at those candidate and interviews or candidate reviews or employee reviews, remember some of those people are disgruntled. But I would look at them and take it with a grain of salt. I would look at it over a span of time too. I would look at their page on LinkedIn. Again, a little bit of a marketing ploy, but some information on there that may not be readily available on their website. Here locally, I always highly recommend Built in Austin, BUILT in Austin.com. That's a great website. They're actually tracking a lot of the companies that have laid off and furloughed, and obviously really, really highlighting those companies that are still hiring. And I guarantee you, there's still a lot of companies out there hiring. So take a look at those resources if you haven't had a chance. On the application, we kind of talked a little bit, Craig and I, about how can you stand out when everything is probably thrown into an applicant tracking system, right? One of the biggest things that I have, this is a horrible example, I had one candidate apply, and I think they applied by linking their LinkedIn profile and uploading it into our system, which is great. Our system does that. But I have a feeling they had a chance to go and verify that everything was right. And I don't think they did, because I don't think their name was systems analyst. But that's how it came across in the application. So one, I'm looking for somebody that's detail oriented, and they didn't even get their name right. I'm not even going to open the resume. I mean, that's how quickly recruiters screen people out, because within 5 minutes of me posting a position, I could have as many as 50 applicants. That's a ton, right? So I'm looking for my little minute details to kind of rule people out. I may go back over those people later, but I'm really looking for people that had everything filled out, completed, all the details in there. I would make sure that you fill out every single line, and some of it may seem silly and some of it may seem redundant, but as I'm looking at you and others didn't, I'm going to look at you, right? So that's super important. The other thing that I think people don't really realize, Kara, I hope you're on. She's my resume queen. I send everybody to Kara. But anyway, one thing that people may not realize is their fancy, beautiful resumes do not come across very well on my applicant tracking system. I really need really simple resumes. I am not talking ASCII text. Our system doesn't need that. Some systems do. And honestly, I'd actually take an ASCII text resume over a really fancy resume where you have your picture and colors and all this stuff. It just doesn't parse well into our applicant tracking system. So again, it might be something that throws me off on looking at you later. And I have a feeling, Craig, I'm probably going to speak a little bit against what you guys talk about. Maybe cover letters. I'm not a cover letter girl. I've never been a cover letter girl. I feel like cover letters are kind of extra, and usually, again, I'm looking through candidates so quickly that I'm not spending the time to go and look at that. So if you have all this stuff on your resume and you're from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and that you have a job that you're working right now in Minneapolis and all this stuff, I have a position, but I can't relocate anybody, or I can't have somebody remote. So I'm probably going to move on because you're not in the right location. All you have to do is change that up, put Kim Hollenshead, Austin, Texas, phone number. None of us care where your area code is anymore. We have no idea when we're calling you where you actually live. So the more that you can put things like that in your resume instead of a cover letter, the better, you know. And then all you're trying to do is get on the phone with me, right? So get on the phone with me, tell me the story about you're in Minneapolis, but you'll be here next month. Okay, because that's when I'm planning on trying to fill this role. So we can talk to you now, but don't rule yourself out. Make things really easy and think of yourself as a recruiter. What kind of questions would you have if you're looking at my resume now? Rule all the questions out, have all the answers ready to go on the resume. And then make sure, I'm sure that they talk about this at the recruiters, the Job Seekers Network, or JSN, is to make sure that you're filling out a different resume for every position. Every position shouldn't have the exact same resume. You should tweak it. If there are words on there that the job description has and you haven't, put it in there. I'm also a big advocate of telling people, when you're filling out your resume and you're trying to pair it up with a job description, add as many keywords from the job description as in your resume as possible without lying. Do not lie. Don't say you've done this if you've never done this. So that makes a lot of sense, I know, to you guys. And then again, we talked a little bit about your network, using your network. Get introduced. Even Craig and I did this last week on LinkedIn. He asked me some questions. I said, let me introduce you to these folks. So bam, 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 I type in a LinkedIn message, I add Craig to it, and I introduce everybody and I let everybody to have conversations. I love doing that. I love networking with people. I love sending emails. I may not know you, but I know that you're looking for a job. These people might not have the job right now, but eventually there could be something. So don't be afraid of networking, even if you know the opportunity is not happening right now. It's super, super important. The other thing that I'm seeing a lot of, and I wish I could do this, I just don't necessarily have the time to do it, is when people ask me, hey, can I have a quick phone call? Can I have a quick coffee? If I took every one of those meetings, I wouldn't be able to get my job done. So I get that that is advantageous for you. It's not always the best use of recruiters' time. I am probably one of the rare recruiters that will meet up or have that phone call from time to time. But it's very rare, and it's getting rarer and rarer these days that people want to do that. They're just like, that's weird. I don't like to meet people I don't know. I talk to people all day long that I don't know, but I have other colleagues that are like, nope, not meeting strangers. So that's a little intrusive. I wouldn't necessarily suggest making those requests to recruiters. So something that I thought was interesting that you may not have realized is this is what a day in the life looks like. I spend all day long in our applicant tracking system. Most companies have some sort of applicant tracking system. Most companies in this really early on startup are maybe using Excel, but this is what we're seeing. So it's already telling me all the different jobs that I'm working, and at any given time I could have anywhere between 10 and 30 jobs that I'm working. So I think that's something that a lot of candidates don't realize as far as the time that we're giving them and the time that it takes us to get back to you. If I'm working on 30 job openings, it's very possible I could have 30 hiring managers. It's a ton, right? So I'm having to keep track of that. I'm a project manager all day, and I'm trying to figure out what that means, which candidates. I need to talk to the candidates, but I'm also having meetings with my hiring managers. So the more that you can match up your resume with things that will pop up into my applicant tracking system using the keywords or skills from the job description, once I get to that time in my day and I'm looking at resumes, I'm going through them really quickly. Have you worked in my industry? That's great. I'd love to see that. I don't see that a lot. We're a financial software industry. This is not the place for that. New York, Chicago, maybe San Francisco. So anybody that has a financial services industry from me at Q2 is a huge deal. Also matching how many applications have you, oh, this is a good one. How many applications have you filled out with our company, right? Sometimes you would think the more applications, the better the shot, right? And I do think job searching is a numbers game. But if you apply to, say, 30, 40 of the jobs at my company, then I'm going to tell you, I think you don't know what you want to do. So if you see maybe 5 jobs that look really interesting for you, apply to 1 or 2. And then give it a few weeks. And then if those other jobs are still open, apply to that next one. But don't apply to all of them at once, because it calls out desperation. We don't want to look desperate, right, in our job search. And it calls out that you don't really know what you want to do. Because I guarantee you, if you have been one of my favorite people in the world, picking up my garbage at my house every Friday, you applying to VP of Finance and the senior admin role and the technical director role, none of those kind of make sense, right? So really limit the times that you apply to companies to just a few, and then stagger it out. The other thing that I think people may not realize is that a lot of companies have places where you can fill out what you want your salary to be, right? I think that's interesting. I think it's fantastic if you write out what your salary needs to be. And it doesn't have to be a specific number, but I'm looking for the range of XYZ, right? And I'm also, we talk a little bit about location. I'm looking to work in Austin. I'm looking to work in Austin, but I'm also open to doing remote work, okay? So talk about some of those things. But the salary requirement, going back to that for a little bit, I have people all day long that don't put that in there. Again, this would make you stand out if you did. I'm going to give you a wide breadth. I know exactly how much I have on budget to pay. And if you're somewhere between, honestly, for me, between $10,000 to $20,000 off on lower than that or higher than that, I'm probably going to look at you, because sometimes I can tweak things, or sometimes I think people don't necessarily fill that out thinking total compensation. So again, you might be filling it out as salary, but I'm trying to figure out, are they really looking for just the base salary? Are they also considering that we have at Q2, we specifically have restricted stock units because we're a publicly traded company. We have a bonus plan that continues to pay out. We have a match on our 401k. So we have a lot of parts and pieces that you may not have considered, again, as total compensation or base salary, but there may be some things that we can help you out with and get you to that number, or even a little higher from an overall perspective. So I think that's super important. And again, it will help you stand out against some of the other applicants that I see. And I guarantee you, if you fill out an application and you've been a CFO at a Fortune 500 company for the last 15 years and you don't fill out your salary requirement and you're applying for a controller, I'm going to know, or a financial analyst, I'm going to know this is way out of your scope of salary requirements. I'm also not really dumb. So again, a little bit more about a day in a life. This is actually my calendar from a couple of weeks ago. You can see that there's a ton of things on there. I'm interviewing candidates. I'm screening candidates. I block out time so I can spend just looking at candidates. I have a meeting every morning at 9 a.m. I have a meeting every afternoon on Friday at 2:30. I have things that are going on talking about this all day long. Really, my Mondays and Tuesdays for me, I'm spent trying to figure out, are these requisitions, these job openings still applicable this week? Have we filled it? Are we getting close to filling it? Has that fallen off the budget for what we're looking at now? And as you can imagine, in this time right now, every single company is doing a lot of forethought into, we put this position out, we said it, in January when we set out our budget for 2020 that we're going to need it by X date. Are we really going to be able to fill it by X date? And does that make sense for us anymore? We are all in this weird space of what's going on with the world, right? So then comes Corona, right? We've heard of this, and it's not the beer, right? This Corona stuff came out at us out of the blue. We had no idea that this was coming when we set our budgets and our jobs, that we wanted to fill for the year of 2020. So a lot of companies, and I know that you're seeing them, have either put off all of their hiring, they're not hiring, they've put it on hold. I know that I've talked to a number of candidates, and seriously, there have been weeks during this quarantine that Friday I shut down and I just want to cry because of the horror stories and the sad stories that I'm hearing from candidates. I know that a lot of internships have been canceled. We worked really hard to keep our internship program. I think we have 40 interns coming to Q2, and I say coming, they're not coming. So it's all being done virtually. All of our hiring has been done virtually since the middle of March. We have not had a single new hire orientation on site. None of the candidates that I've hired over the last couple of months have ever met any of their hiring managers or any of their colleagues in person. It's all being done virtual, and we're doing our very, very best to make sure that it's lined up and as close to a realistic experience as we possibly can. again, we're a rather large company in Austin. I think a lot of people don't realize that we are. We have 1,700 employees globally. We have about 1,000 employees here in the Austin area. Our headquarters is up at the corner of Cedar Park and North Austin, kind of by Lakeline Mall. We have a lot of resources available to us. So we have a virtual tour, and granted, it's not a fancy virtual tour. We have pictures of our offices here in Austin and Nebraska and Iowa and North Carolina, and we have pictures of our offices in Australia and India and the UK. And so we get our candidates and our new hires through a little bit of, this is what a day in the life would look like when we get back to work, right? So don't be surprised if you're seeing some of that. Don't be really surprised. I would say even if you get a job offer, until you're actually working at that company, continue to interview. And I know that sounds horrible, but again, I've heard some really, really crazy stories. Not necessarily all of them from here in Austin, if that's helpful. So keep on interviewing. There's something out there for you. One of my favorite, not really, this is sarcastic, one of my favorite questions that I get asked after I tell a candidate a little bit about where we are in the process, right? Well, and I always ask them, I'm like, do you have any other questions for me? And I open it up, and usually I feel like I've touched base with them enough times in the conversation that they don't, but I'm open for that, right? The favorite question is, so do you know what the timeline will be for this position? No. I do not know the timeline. Every single position that I have, we're working to fill it as quickly as possible. Right now, quickly as possible kind of changes. So every Friday, I told you I have a meeting with my bigger group every Friday, and we actually go over every single week all the jobs that this particular executive leader is hiring for in his group. So we're talking, I think there's around 40 positions. Many of those positions, we have said since the beginning of 2020, we wanted to hire in May. We wanted to hire in March. We wanted to hire in April. Some of those March and April and May hires have been pushed out to October. Some of them have pushed back to 2021. Because what we're finding, and as you can imagine, if you're running a business, thank God I don't make these decisions. As you're running a business during Corona, COVID, whatever we call this crazy world right now, there are parts of our business that have slowed down and other parts of our business that have spun up out of control. So in the financial industry, as you can imagine, we are working with banks, small to medium-sized banks and credit unions. And it's insane where we thought we were going to be with some of these financial institutions to where we are today, right? So we're doing things, it's just really kind of awesome for me. When I came to Q2, I had no idea that my hometown, my small hometown Texas credit union was one of our customers, and it's running on a white label on Q2. But anyway, so I had no idea all that information that I was getting from my credit union was really stuff that was spun off from Q2, right? So we may have had financial institutions that were in the middle of rolling out an upgrade, or maybe their mobile platform for the first time ever, right? And so all of those companies or financial institutions are scrambling, right? We need mobile applications, we need mobile access right now, because our customers cannot come into the branch, right? You can't go and see your banker anymore. Oh my gosh, we need to hurry up. And then we have some smaller banks, again, they're not necessarily super technical, right? Some of the smaller banks are like, hang on, hold off, we don't know what we're doing right now. We're just trying to figure this out. Totally cool. In the last 2 years, we did some acquisitions, and those were into the lending space. So within that lending space, bam, that's where our hotspot is. Our acquired company in North Carolina teamed up with Bank of America. Bank of America had been a customer of theirs for a little while, maybe the end of last year. Within a 48-hour time period, they spun off all of the software that needed to happen to have Bank of America be able to give loans out to these small businesses to keep their employees employed through the federal government. Fantastic, right? Who knew that that was going to be something that we needed to do? And who has ever heard of spinning off a brand new software product within 48 hours with all their quality testing and making sure that all the bells and whistles were working? Oh my gosh, that's crazy. I have a feeling that there were some people that were not sleeping in that 48 hours. So, and I guarantee you every single company that you're talking to is kind of in the same boat. We're trying our best to navigate this just like you are, and trying to not only keep our employees employed, but how do we add more? Where do we add more? Where should we add more? It's a crazy juggling act, as you can well imagine. So one of the things, though, that I think is very, very important when you're getting to a conversation with a recruiter is asking them about follow-up. Even if you're doing it by email or whatever. Hey, Kim, I just talked to you today. When would be a good time for me to follow up? And I actually do ask my candidates to follow up. I'll tell them my timeline. Hey, I'm probably going to follow up with you within 24 to 48 hours. But if you don't hear from me by the end of the week, you're not going to offend me if you ping me, okay? So ask the recruiter, ask the hiring manager, ask whoever you're finally getting to speak to, what's their preference? Should I follow up with you by the end of the week? Is email better, phone, texting? What's the best? And how quickly? I guarantee you, if you try and follow up with me morning, noon, and night, I'm probably going to get really tired of hearing from you. So don't overwhelm me. You've already seen my calendar. It's pretty crazy. So be sure that you're asking and being very considerate of their time as well. And again, always be super, super considerate and nice on emails and phone conversations and text too. I think that's super important. And again, another way to make you stand out, right? So I do want to encourage you that everything comes at its right time. I know that many of you have probably experienced what a lot of people out there have, which is layoff or furlough. And I tell you what, so have I. I have been laid off 5 times because you know what happens to recruiters when they're not hiring? I'm out. I'm out. It's a business decision. I guarantee you it's not because I don't know what I'm talking about. I do know what I'm talking about, but I'm an easy elimination position. If you're not hiring, you don't see yourself hiring for a while, there's not a need for me, right? But every single time I've landed a bigger, better position. And I know it sounds crazy, but I think if you leave jobs in the technical world every few years, you actually make more money. I know nobody likes to talk about that, right? That sounds crazy. So I am very encouraged in knowing that every single one of you guys, there are better things ahead. There is a better opportunity. There's something that you haven't considered, but it's going to be right for you at the right time. Everything is going to happen when it's supposed to. I am also a faith-filled believer, and I think that's super important. That's something that's near and dear to my heart. I know that my God has a plan for me, and I know that he has a plan for you in your life, and there's going to be something that's going to be a bigger, better thing for you than you could have ever imagined. So with that, that's all I have, Craig. I wasn't able to catch any questions as we were going, but would be happy to answer any of them.
Yes, I do have some questions that are in chat. So go ahead and start asking those. I did want to comment on your cover letter. Yes, we do teach cover letters and write your way to your next job. And but we cover a lot more than just cover letters. And we have found about 50% of the recruiters like cover letters, and 50% are kind of like you. And they are kind of as adamant on the other side as you are adamant on you know, not liking them. So we're okay with that.
I've always felt that we're about a 50-50 group on that too. And obviously, if a position requires and says, please submit a cover letter, you submit the cover letter, right? And I think there's a lot of things that you can answer in the cover letter. But again, when I'm scanning through tons and tons of resumes, that's the last thing that I'm going to look at if there is one. Yes. So Evelyn, you asked, what's the best way to handle intentionally dialing back work responsibilities when you still want to be engaged, productive employee with less responsibilities and hours? That's a great question. I would say, and again, this is really probably more for my fantastic friend and resume writer of how to add in things that are not as large, maybe, I guess, really the work that you've done. So if you've been a CFO, but you're okay with being a controller, maybe add that in at the beginning of the paragraph and talk to them how you're looking for, you know, you don't want to be the woman in charge anymore, but you still want to be very involved and you want to keep your finance and accounting skills sharp. So talk to them a little bit about that in the resume, actually. I think answering some of those questions would be helpful. But Kara, if you're on, I would love to hear what you have to say about that too.
Well, we have other people too.
Yes. Yeah, I'm sure. She's the one I know.
Yeah. Becky Terry's on, and so Becky, if you have anything to say, let me know. Wesley asked, does your ATS accommodate word tense or word sequencing in other variations like project managed versus managed projects?
It doesn't really matter for me. The way that I use our applicant tracking system, I don't use that. I have used other applicant tracking systems that it actually gives me a score of this resume fits 80%, and I think that they probably are looking at tenses of words. For mine, I'm actually using the old-fashioned way, which is my eyeballs. So it wouldn't matter to me if you have a variation of those words.
Okay.
That's a great question too, though.
And then you talked about completing the salary expectation field on an online application form, but you also talked about how these forms do not make a distinction between the base salary and maybe the other parts of compensation. How do you handle these types of other compensation?
Yeah, and that's a really weird question. Not that your question was weird, but it's a really weird area. I have not always worked in applicant tracking systems that have that requirement. I think a lot of us think that just naturally people won't answer it. So if it's on there and you have the ability to write things in another note, or if you can write out answers in that field, which actually I think ours is. I think ours is not just a number field. I think you can actually add text in there as well. So you could put something, it asks salary. I don't know if you're asking total compensation or base. This is the range that I would be looking for from a base perspective. So if you have the ability to do that, I would do that. And again, it can be a range. Just know that we also have a compensation range. I'm also compensation has been really strange over the last few years. If you live in Texas, I can still ask you how much you made. But if you listen to recruiters more often, how we're asking it is how much would you like to make? Because there are so many states now that make it illegal for me to ask you about your compensation, or your compensation of where you've been. So in the state of California, New York, probably New Jersey, some of the other states up in the Northeast, I cannot ask you what you've made before. So if you made $50,000, but you're looking at a $100,000 position, as long as you have the requirements, then that's all that I should consider. So it is a really weird question.
Okay.
Again, not your question, but yes.
What do you think about when a job seeker puts in like $1 or $11,111? Something that's not really a real compensation. What do you think about that?
I think they don't know what the question was. I think it's really weird. I've seen some of that lately, and I really wonder if they understood what that box was for at all. I think we actually have two boxes, one that says your minimum, your maximum, or your minimum salary requirement, your desired maybe. And I think it's really weird. I've had a couple people lately that I see like 120. I'm like, are you asking for $120 an hour? I don't understand what that means. So again, if that just looks a little wonky, I may go on to the next candidate. And I'm not saying I'm ruling you out immediately, but I'm going to have to come back and really look at your other information. And if I have that many applicants to go through, I'm just going to scan over you and come back later. So it may not be the most advantageous thing to do that. You're not looking for a Craigslist thing off Craigslist. You're looking for a job.
Yeah. Okay. And how about employment gaps? How do you like seeing those reflected? Do you personally go through and just make sure that kind of there's no major gaps? And do you like seeing explanations for those?
It depends on how long the gap is. I think most resumes that I see now line up pretty fast and pretty easily. I had a really good phone conversation with a candidate, and unfortunately, that's one of those positions we're putting on hold right now, which I absolutely hate. But her most recent position, she put it was a stay-at-home mom for the last 7 years. And prior to that, she was doing exactly what I need her to do. She was probably getting paid a heck of a lot less because at that point she was living in California. So I could even offer her more money even after her 7-year gap. So to me, the more you can explain that, again, the more you can answer some of those questions that you think might come up, the better. And it doesn't have to be really wordy explanations. It can be really simple explanations. I stayed at home to take care of children, would love to talk with you a little bit more about why I took that time off. So yeah, I would try and probably put a little bit of explanation of why there's a gap. And really too, I tend to skip over candidates that are not at places for very long. If I see your last 5 jobs, you've only been at every single one of those for less than a year, I'm probably going to also move on and look at candidates that have a little bit more long tenure in the companies that they've been at. Even if you have some good explanations, even if all of those companies folded, I have more questions than I have answers for when I'm looking at the resume. So I may move on and look at some of those other candidates. Again, it doesn't say I'm not going to come back to you, but I do first passes really, really fast to try and rule out, you know, are they in the Philippines? I definitely can't bring somebody over here right now from the Philippines. Are they only just out of college and I'm looking for somebody with 12 years of experience? So I screen through those people super fast and then come back and kind of look at people that I am a little questions about.
Okay. Do y'all do reference checks?
No.
Okay, so you don't do any reference checks.
We do background checks. It's not part of my responsibility. It's another part of our human resources group, but not
background check is more like a criminal history and credit history, or just criminal?
Actually, I think for all the positions at Q2, I think all of them, because we're a financial services company, we do both credit and criminal.
Okay. And
credit is not a normal thing in almost every single company. So, but when you're working in a financial world, it is. If you're working in a financial position, it most definitely is most likely going to be something that you're going to go through. But
okay.
our background checks come back super fast right now, like super fast.
Okay. I've got somebody interested in a product management role at Q2. And they've had 3 different product manager owner roles in the past, but you know, not in your specific industry or field. Does that matter for the product manager role, or are you looking for more specific background?
That is a great question. And it's not necessarily always up to the recruiter. A lot of times it's up to the hiring manager. I have hiring managers that are very specific about, no, they need to have been in our industry. I have other hiring managers that are like, oh, if they've done it, they can probably do it. I think one of the things that is a common thread with hiring managers across the board is software product management versus product management in some sort of other area. I think it's very specific. So if you've product managed for, I don't know, a marketing advertising agency, you're not necessarily dealing with software engineers and developers. So it's kind of a weird crossover, and you might understand timelines and scopes of work and things like that. But in our industry, it's going to take you longer to ramp up versus this is a software town, I think, still, and I can probably find somebody that's maybe a closer match. So. Okay. And are you seeing also the questions and answers part? Because I have a couple here as well.
Okay, go ahead. You can take one of those.
So, William, you asked, before COVID-19, your main challenge was that you're 20 plus years experienced professional electrical engineer with a degree, 4+ years college, just left school in my senior year, and now with COVID-19, how's that challenge affected? More of a challenge or less? If you have 20 years of experience, I don't really care. Because I suspect that your degree was a long time ago and that you left your senior year. I don't care, because you have 20 years of experience. So I don't think any recruiters should be necessarily looking at that. I think your experience level should speak to that. And I think you should have some really fantastic bullet points of things that you've been able to accomplish in your 20-year tenure. And then Stacy, you asked, how long of a tenure is acceptable in a specific position? Before being laid off, I was at my company for 21 years in several different roles. I've been told that my longevity at a single company is detrimental because I wasn't job hopping externally every 2 years. I know, isn't that a crazy thing to think about? But in this industry, in this space in Austin, we do feel like, I think a lot of recruiters feel like you get more experience being at different companies. So I think you need to figure out how to really call out those roles that you have and how they differentiated yourself, and the different things that you were able to do while you were at one company, but learning different skill sets. So I think the more that you can call out that in your resume, and obviously you'll be able to talk about it when you're talking to one of us on the phone, but figure out ways to make that look a little bit different on your resume is how I would do it.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Kim. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing